And we are live now. I think our guest was booted down, some problems with StreamYard today, but our guest is going to join us in a couple of moments. His name is Reuben Abootorabi. We already have a pod with Reuben, who's a great guest. So he is in the LA area. I'm not sure if it was because of the connection, because LA is burning today. And yeah, he'll probably be back in a couple of seconds. But to describe Ruben, he is the CEO of the Austin agency. He's a great CEO with Top Advice. So he's a biztainment pioneer, has custom experience architect in creating the intersection of business and entertainment in Santa Monica in LA. So let's hope that everything is fine because, yes, LA is still under siege by fire today. This podcast is presented to you by podpire.com. Podpire.com is my podcasting company. If you want to start a podcast, scale a podcast, monetize a podcast, you can go to podpire.com and you can download our free ebook. We have an ebook to get you up to scale with your AI podcasting venture. We also have a masterclass that is paid, but should serve to accelerate your learning. Um, yes, so Ruben is back now. So I just added him to the room. Ruben, we're live. I don't know why,
Fantastic.
but it booted you right like when I started. Maybe if you want to tell us, more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Charles, good to see you again. Happy New Year. Yeah, I've been in disruption for over 10 years. I've worked both sides of the fence. I've helped a lot of brilliant but early stage companies enter the Fortune 2000, enter the director and VP level, build key relationships and empower their success by having these amazing partnerships. And then I've worked with really big companies and helping them think and act like aggressive entrepreneurs and what does it look like to disrupt themselves and how do they how can they see the game? Lots of smart people working in those big companies. How can they see the play and get there quicker?
Year 2024, how was it? What were the victories? What were the challenges? And what do you have in store for 2025 amidst this LA fire disruption?
Yeah, it's an interesting time. Living through a major firestorm here in LA. We didn't see it coming, and a lot of people are being disrupted right now. That disruption can happen at any time, anywhere, any place, and there's a real human cost to it. It's all nice and sexy to talk about disruption, and we're going after a big company. What we don't talk about are the thousands of people who lose their jobs. People that get displaced financially, economically, career-wise. There's a cost to it, right? It's not just an ecosystem without a cost to it. 2024 was a good year for me. It was a year of transition. I really started to transition away from my traditional consulting services and moving more into the space between business and entertainment. I'm working on a reality TV show, my first unscripted reality TV show. So I'm putting the resources together for that. That will come out of stealth mode here in a few months. I'll contact you so we can do another interview and we can talk about that. But it's a business show, competition, disruption, and that's my specialty. But I'm just letting things unfold. So that's where I'm at right now.
And tell us about disruption because it's been a word that's been overused over the year. Just right before you had Jay Samit, Disrupt You author, and it seems that everyone in the corporate world sort of hates this word because they don't want to be disrupted. Markets don't want to be disrupted either. Like people just want a better solution, right? So is it still a good word to use? And what's people's perception as per disruption and having a Navy SEAL team dropped in their companies for massive change and discomfort?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a loaded word, right? It's a loaded word. On the one hand, it's very attractive and people like to talk about disruption. I think it's a very poorly defined word, if I'm being honest with you. What is disruption? Are we talking about an incremental gain in a product or service? Are we talking about a brand new service? Who's delivering it? Is it the big company, the small company? And how much disruption is really just geared towards hype and being acquired, right? Big companies looking at these small companies saying, okay, it's time to pick you up and purchase you. So, I think disruption to me is much more interesting. You look at it environmentally. We just had a pandemic. Then we had Brexit. Then we've had some political unexpectancy. I think we're in for the next couple of years of some real big economic shocks. I think we're seeing two things released into the world that cannot be stopped. Now, what their role or impact will be will have to be determined. One is demographics and one is debt. So we got countries that have tremendous demographic crises that are really beginning to show up in China, Korea, Germany. I think the US can stave it off for about another half a century or so. But we're seeing some big economies with some massive demographic shifts that are not in their favor. And then you have debt. The whole world essentially is loaded up on debt, from China and their provincial debt to the United States federal debt and everything and anywhere in between. We're seeing debt levels that are rising at a very rapid rate. So before we talk about maybe company disruption, I think it's important to look at the overall environment of disruption. And like, we have a firestorm here in LA. You know, it's terrible. We're going to see some firestorms in our economy. We're going to see some firestorms in trade, right? You got the U.S. Navy, who no longer is agreeing to protect global shipping. We're going to see a contraction in globalization. What do all these changes mean? And so what I think is interesting, Charles, what will be interesting is, are we going to face one storm, or are we going to face a multi-headed hydra, where we're going to have several things hitting at the same time, either in the form of dominoes, one affecting the next, or two or three major crises playing off each other at the same time. And that's going to be really interesting to see what happens. So when people are talking about AI, for example, can AI help mitigate some of these demographic changes? Possibly, that'd be interesting. With AI, one of the big dangers is, how quickly are we allowing the transformation to happen? Are we transitioning people quickly enough, helping them find jobs? What kind of social instability will come along with it? So this whole term of disruption, some of it we can try to cause ourselves by going out with a new service or solution, but we're gonna be on the receiving end of a lot of disruption. And how do we respond and react to that? How do we have that anti-fragile mentality? How do we help people rise to the occasion, see opportunity, and how do we empower them to do so? That's what I've always found interesting, is the leadership side of disruption. How do you empower teams to move faster, tap into existing wisdom, garner resources, and also we're seeing recession, for example, in tech, right? We're seeing a recession, thousands are being laid off. How do you do more with less? So when the perfect storm, if you want to use the word disruption, are we dishing it or receiving it? Either way, no one's going to be escaping it.
Very good insights here. Makes me think. So can we agree on the fact that there's more and more changes and that is accelerating, or do you feel eventually changes and the pace of it will eventually slow down?
That's a great question. I don't think it'll slow down. I think it'll look different. You know, I think it will look different. Are we trying to disrupt each other, or can we move more into a form of collaboration? Instead of trying to tear each other down and fight for the same pie, can we maybe team in new and interesting ways to expand the pie? Right? That to me is much more interesting. No, change is coming, and it's going faster and faster. There's no slowing that down at all. And if you think about it, when I grew up, we had 4.5 billion people on the planet. Now we have north of 8. By the time I die, if I live a normal, healthy, long life, we're looking at about 10 billion people. No, change. The atoms are colliding faster and faster, as they should. Is how do we direct this? And are we seeing it as competitive or collaborative? And how can we create a collaborative culture where we can build on each other's success?
It seems impossible to me in the current state of the US being the world leader with such a divisive leader, to have people come up together. To me, that would be the greatest threat of our times.
Well, in a friendly way, maybe, but at the same token, you know, what was it Machiavelli said? Do you want to be loved, or you want to be feared? You know, and if it were the choice between the two, rather be feared.
Yeah, but Machiavellian never scaled. It was terrible advice for any leader.
I don't disagree, and I'm not a big believer in the 48 laws of power and all that. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm not saying there's not truth to it, but I'm saying it's a very ruthless way of living life, and I think there's a tremendous cost that will catch up to you sooner or later. But you know, Trump is a disruptor, and I'm not taking a political stance on him, whether we like it or not. This is what disruption looks like in the political scene, and so we will see the ripple effects of that. You're right. The U.S. is the leader, and if you look at, for example, the U.S. versus the EU, 15 years ago, the economies were roughly on par. Today, the U.S. is twice the size of the EU, and so we need the U.S. to be robust. We need, American capital. We need American thinking. And how do we involve others in a really friendly and efficient way in doing so? Like, we need to see a healthy, emerging China as a friend and an ally, but China also needs to make some radical changes. So everyone's up for, what does the new status quo look like?
Yeah, it's like being less bipolar, right? And being less black or white. I think it's an and equation. It's like cooperation and competition. Yes, disruption can bring a lot of value, right? Because when you bring up EU, well, most entrepreneurs' nightmares to be in the EU, right? And so much restrictions, and so it's the frustration of being in a system that doesn't support entrepreneurship. And even Canada is very much on the socialist end of things. I think socialism is definitely not the way to get there. AI, can it fix these micro ills? Can it get us better information for world leaders to take better long-term decisions, or can it accelerate the mayhem?
It'll probably do a little bit of both, in all honesty. There'll always be a little bit of mayhem. I think that mayhem is what disruption thrives on. I think it'll do a little bit of both, but it's going to challenge everything, right? Look at education. Do we need the same traditional education system that we've had for the last, say, 100 years? Or will AI and all these new technologies what will that do to education? Do we need to know grammar as well as we knew grammar? What about how we solve math equations? Is it better to be tech savvy and have these instruments solve them for us and know how to use them to solve these problems than it is for us to understand the underlying theory? And I don't have an answer for you on that, but I think that will be challenged. Henry Ford once said, I don't need to know all these answers. I can find somebody within 5 minutes who will give me the answer. And I think now we're beginning to get into that realm of what do we do? What about financial literacy? There's so many different, AI will challenge everything. And at the same token, it will be a lot of business as usual. So what's interesting with AI is who it's challenging. Historically, disruption has gone after a lot of blue-collar jobs, right? In automotive, for example, with robotics and such coming in, manufacturing. But now it's going after a lot of white-collar jobs. If you're in legal or medical or paralegal and so forth. So it's going to be interesting who it affects and how do we use those resources efficiently. College, do we need the education system? I mean, again, do we need the university levels that we have? So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of it. I think it might create a more equal playing field, which would be interesting because ideas transfer real easily and capital can move real easily. And we can issue visas. So if one country, for example, like you mentioned, I don't know much about the Canadian economic system, to be honest with you, but let's say somebody has a harder time in Canada being an entrepreneur, will they just transfer over to the United States? And can we give them visas to do so? Elon Musk came out of South Africa, and now he's firmly planted in the US. So how this plays out will be really interesting, and the competition for talent and capital. Capital always has to get a return on investment, and there's more capital out there than we've ever had before. So in some ways, the US is poised for a massive capital infusion if there's more disturbances in the world, because we still have a relatively stable legal environment and political environment. I say relatively, it's gotten more sharp in the years that have gone by. And we are the only country that could absorb that level of capital. I mean, Sweden couldn't take on $1 trillion. It would crash their economy in a heartbeat, right? And Sweden's an amazing place for entrepreneurs. But the US can. And the US also has a lot of big infrastructure projects that a lot of the countries that have seen growth in the last 20, 25 years, like China, are running out of. There are only so many airports and dams and harbors you can build. Well, in the US, we probably need $3 to $5 trillion worth of infrastructure. So it's an interesting time, Charles, to see where's the money flowing. There's this concept of Fortress North America, where you have Canada with the raw materials, the US with the labor force, and Mexico with the labor force, and the US with the capital and the know-how. Now that's obviously a gross generalization, but you get my drift. I think North America seems relatively poised to prosper.
Yes. Even Mexico, right? So cutting
Absolutely.
Mexico out of the equation is really bad. And to comment, Canada is not doing well economically. That's why a lot of people are shitting on just Justin Trudeau. Trump has somewhat done well on an economic side, but that's short term, right? Like his decisions are pretty bad for the US on the long term. I think we need to come together generally as a world, play short term and long term games, right? Like both have their value, but generally speaking, some kind of AI to calculate stuff at scale and make better decisions, incredibly complex decision, right? When we're talking about international commerce. And yes, every countries have their own positive things. Canada has done somewhat well on the immigration side of things. Nowadays, a bit less, right? They've gone the US way. We're also bitches to the US. Everything that US does, we need to sort of follow it, because they're the world leader, right? So, yeah, I think generally speaking, more informed, more scientific decisions being made. But the thing is, I think democracy is the problem in itself, because most of humans are dumb and stupid, and when you promote them to take very hard decisions, they will often vote for what's easy and what's fitting with their emotions, their beliefs, and their values, right? So that also needs some kind of modifications. The current technocracy that Trump has been putting forward is somewhat good. I think it can be a step towards that direction in which experts are responsible for decisions, right? Not saying that Elon's perfect, right? Even Trump came from an immigration background, so it's sort of ironic that these guys that have now made it now are refusing others are and not giving others the opportunities. But yes, immigration, I mean, US was built on it. So let's not stop that, right? I think it's a good thing, mostly with some important asterisks. Now, I have various questions because we have taken so many topics, but concerning the Austin agency, you're targeting corporations, and I want to ask you if you think that corporations do scale in the age of AI. Do you feel that having so many employees that will be laid off, that's like 100% certainty? Do you think that they will scale? Will they shift into putting all this cash in the coffins into AI agents, or will they be erased out of the map, but by a more agile startup such as OpenAI, for example?
All of the above. All of the above. We'll see a little bit of everything. We'll see organizations that reinvent themselves. Microsoft under Satya Nadella has done a fantastic job of reinventing itself. We'll see other leaders like that step up and reinvent their organizations. We'll see some who will show up really late to the game or won't fully understand how to use it, apply it, and will be prone to more aggressive startups. So and the money, the institutional money that's backing them now, right? So for longer, they're not looking for the quick exits necessarily. They might be backing them for longer and for more rounds, and then rolling up acquisitions. So we're going to see everything in between. A lot of the companies now who are in the top 100, Fortune 100, weren't in the top Fortune 100 20 years ago. 20 years ago, GE was the most valuable company in the world. The most valuable company in the world was GE. And GE has now been broken up into multiple pieces and will never quite be the same. I think the individual units will do well, but not the Jack Welch era of GE. That's long gone. As for the US, yeah, we are a country of immigrants. And I think that's why people still want to come here. And immigrants still see the economic opportunities in America. Immigrants still see the American dream. They still say, I can come here. I don't have to pay bribes. I don't have to, if I do well, I can move into any neighborhood, join any club, reasonably speaking, and put my kids in private school. They see a lot of opportunity in the United States. So, we're dealing with issues that can't really be avoided. And I'm not getting political. I have opinions on both sides of the aisle. But entitlements, we're not going to be able to outrun that. The fact that we're spending more interest now than we're doing on our national security and defense, we're going to have to deal with this. So a lot of things that we could kick the can down the road on, we'll no longer be able to do so. We're going to actually have to deal with it. The U.S. for the last 35 to 40 years has been relatively good in the sense that we've been able to export some of our problems, and we can't do that anymore. So it's going to be a little bit of both, but it's a very wealthy country. It's a very smart country. You know what the U.S. has more than anything else, Charles? It's a country
innovative minds and intelligence
and hope, and hope
and motivation. Yeah,
it's
American
a
dream.
very, very hopeful place. In America, you can fail, and as long as you get back up and try again, people will applaud you. You can switch careers midway through your life. You can try new things. There's capital for it. People are willing to take risks. That pioneering spirit, the best part of the pioneering spirit, is very much alive in the U.S. still. And that's one of the country's greatest assets and greatest resources. People have counted the U.S. out before. Back in the 30s, the fascists in Europe thought the U.S. was done, that they were finished, that they were on the ropes. Big mistake. U.S. had one of the best centuries it's ever had. So the U.S. will do well, and I think that a lot of other countries as well. So it's going to be interesting how this plays itself out, what alliances and strategic, what the strategic roadmap will look like.
Right. And coming back to you, when you enter these big corporations, do you feel that you can have a quick impact, or is it like rah-rah stuff that gets forgotten by employees that are not accountable? You coach them and you quote unquote disrupt them, but a couple of months later, these employees are just not there anymore. They're fired. And it's just been like something they try. How do you really disrupt such a gigantic organization, such a bureaucratic organization into real disruption and change?
Well, you got the inside out and the outside in. The outside in was up until a few years ago, nobody really cared that much about disruption because it was booming, especially tech. and everyone, you could leave your job and have another one within 3 hours, right? So there was a lot of mobility, and people weren't as pressured. Let's put it that way, pressured. Now it's a different environmental landscape. So it's about the right leader with the right project at the right time, and they have the right motivation for change. If you can get that equation right, yes, you will see very rapid change. They're making big decisions. They want your input. They want their people to think differently. This is a very pressing issue that will drive systemic and lasting change. If it's a vanity project or a nice to have, I'm going into my quarterly ops review, I've got to show somebody I'm thinking about something innovative, but we're really stuck in the status quo. That's different. Yeah, we did it. We checked it off the box. You see that with a lot of big initiatives. Where's the corporation at? Who's leading it? What change are they driving? Why are they driving it? And who's motivated by it? So you have to, it just depends on the organization. I bet right now, Disney is probably a highly motivated place for disruption and innovation, for fresh thinking, right? Ford was a highly motivated place 15, 20 years ago. They nearly went belly up, right? They leveraged everything. If you want to read a great book, read American Icon. It's a fascinating book about Ford's turnaround. They leveraged everything before the 2008, 2009 crisis, didn't take any government money, and managed to come out of it stronger. So it's going to be interesting. I think we're in the age now, my friend, of mergers too, and we'll see how many of those are successful. Companies are now beginning to team. We saw a big merger in the auto industry in Japan, right? Two giants are merging there. So let's see what happens. It's going to be a lot of shock and awe for a while.
Thanks for being on again. The energy, the knowledge, Reuben. Where can people find out more about you?
Come to LinkedIn. Just find me on LinkedIn. I'm an equal opportunity connector. Reuben Abootorabi on LinkedIn. Come find me.